Human-assisted reproductive technology storage amendment bill. Interrupted debate on third reading.
Mr. Speaker.
Members, when we were last debating this bill, Dr. Paul Hutchison was speaking and has 9 minutes 30 seconds remaining in which to speak. Dr. Paul Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me pleasure to continue speaking on this Human-Assisted Reproductive Technology Amendment Bill. As I was saying, this came about after immediate inquiries to the Minister of Justice. There was concern that clinics were acting in good faith, or that clinics acting in good faith could be storing embryos and gametes, that's sperms and eggs, illegally. The whole point about this bill is to make it absolutely clear the rules around storage, and that indeed has successfully been achieved by this legislation. The bill now clarifies the rules around the storage. This is very, very important, Mr. Speaker, because of the hugely emotional area that this encompasses, particularly for patients, and of course the very important legal issues for clinics. So that part of it has been very satisfactory. In terms of the various parts of the bill, one of the aspects that people raised their eyes about a little bit was the issue of gametes and embryos stored in other countries. And indeed, this is an area that was very vital to ensure that we had accurately, because storage outside of New Zealand clearly must be counted as part of the 10-year period, and there is literally an international tourism that is going on with IVF around the world in the order of 10,000 couples a year travelling from one country to another, and so it is particularly important to ensure that storage rules are very clearly defined. There were calls during the debate about a review mechanism for the Act, but the view was that generally this legislation has worked very well so far, that there have been no complaints, and that because it is relatively new legislation, and because it is legislation that does require flexibility about it, it is not appropriate at this stage to consider review, but important that we keep it in mind in the future. One aspect of the debate that stood out were the concerns expressed by the Maori Party. Te Uraroa Flavel said in his first reading of the bill, the Maori Party has a considerable sense of sadness that we even have bills like these in front of the House. He went on to say, I cannot say that anyone in the Maori Party is at ease with the discussions around assisted reproductive technology. And further to that, Honi Harawira cemented in those views and made some fairly strong concerns about the technology and that Māori were being left out. He cited a variety of papers in his speech that I took the bother of looking up, and I was quite surprised. The first one is one by Mariwa Glover and Benedicta Russo, Your Child is Your Whakapapa. I found this very convoluted, wordy, full of sociological verbiage and lacking any precise conclusion. Mr. Speaker, to give you an example, I look at one of the pages here in this report entitled Strategic Naturalising and the Fluidity of Relatedness. I found this very hard to understand. It went on to say it's important to stress here the preliminary nature of the data on which this article is based. The majority of the participants involved in HUI did not have direct experience of AHR or necessarily infertility. They were a predominantly self-selected group of interested people who through the research process became informed lay people. What I'm concerned about is that the members who actually admitted to me that they were merely parroting references that they had been given to speak about in their written speeches. One of the other ones cited was Te Tauranga Waka, an action plan for addressing Māori concerns about the system and process for ethical review of issues relating to human participation in research and innovative technologies. Again, that was slightly more practical in its key actions and recommendations. But the message that I would have to the Māori Party is that there is a tremendous amount of thinking behind the human-assisted reproductive technology legislation. Philosophers, ethicists, lawyers, clinicians, scientists have for years worked to get this legislation in New Zealand as good as it could be. And I would urge the Māori Party to have a look at the writings from the Assisted Committee of Assisted Reproductive Technology and the Ethics Committee as well, because the concerns to ensure there is thought given to Māori aspects are right at the forefront. In fact, the Human Assisted Reproductive Technology Act requires that everyone exercising powers or performing functions under this Act must be guided by its principles, including the principles that the needs, values and beliefs of Māori should be considered and treated with respect. And I believe there is a reciprocal responsibility for members of the Māori Party to take time to read the very well-considered literature in this area. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to end by just making mention of the fact that on the 4th of October, the Nobel Prize Committee awarded to Dr. Edwards the Nobel Prize for Medicine or Physiology. And it was, of course, in 1978 that the first test tube baby was born, but since then, something like 4 million babies, the population of New Zealand, have been born through these technologies. And I think it is important to remind the House, just for those people who are affected by infertility, how remarkable these technologies can be. In fact, Professor Edwards said that in his view, the most important thing in life is having a child. Nothing is more special than a child. From my point of view, there's no doubt that for those that do have trouble to conceive, and it's almost 1 in 5 couples, birth technologies are amazing and positive, provided they are used with humanity and are used ethically and wisely. And Mr. Speaker, I believe this amendment bill that we have been discussing over the last few months is part of New Zealand's contribution to ensure that we make the rules as clarified as possible, that we have a strong ethics background to back them up, and that indeed our clinics will give wise counsel to the many patients that come to them around New Zealand.
Call Ian Lees-Galloway.
Mr. Speaker,